Going on, everybody? Aidan from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you after the Eagles are once again dismantled on national television in front of a national audience. It went honestly, the energy today felt like it was going to go that way. In every group text I was in, this felt like how it was going to go. It just didn't feel like they were there mentally. And I think kind of what I hate the most is the energy that we saw from them tonight. And they had the political guy on during the pregame, and Steve Wanacki, who usually gives you like the electoral map graphs and says like, here's where you got to make up ground. Here's where they have the advantage. And they had that for the Eagles. And they're like, they could lose tonight and they'll still be fine. And they rehashed that point again and again throughout the broadcast. And the energy matched that tonight, which bothers me so much because, yeah, you do still control your own destiny. And yes, you probably still could win this division. And yes, you could probably still be the one seed, given how these schedules look. From a morale point of view, why should any of us be excited about this team? The concerns from the past few weeks are the same sustained concerns that there are right now. So nothing has really changed. And I don't get this whole energy of, oh, yeah, like, oh, though, you know what? Like, what did you see from the offense tonight that you should be in a good headspace that they'll win next week in Seattle, where they haven't won in a millennium? It's not like the gauntlet's over. So let's just get into the game itself. It starts out how every other single game has started out for this team. They gave up every third down conversion on the first drive. They had 3 missed tackles on that drive. They get down into the red zone, and CeeDee Lamb gets into the slot, a point of weakness, a point that's been exploited for this team quite some time since Avonte Maddox got hurt in week 2. He scores a touchdown easily. There's no one in the vicinity of him. The offense takes over. They're able to move the ball. They get to the red zone. They fumble the football. On that drive, they had 3 penalties, so they constantly put themselves behind the 8 ball, which is just the cycle that they seem to be in. Everything is rigid and everything is more difficult than it needs to be. On that drive, they convert a third down after 2 penalties. So they run a hurry up. They get a first down, but that's called back because of offensive pass interference. So instead of having a first down at the 10-yard line, you have a 1st and 20 from the 30, and then Jalen Hurts fumbles on the next play. I think the first 2 drives are just a summation of everything that's wrong with this team right now. Penalty-wise, they had 8 penalties for 85 yards tonight. They had more penalty yardage. They had more turnovers than the Cowboys. Every little detail is concerning, and you mix that with the points of exploitation on defense, which have been linebacker over the middle of the field, slot corner, just being able to line up really good receivers like Deebo Samuel and CeeDee Lamb, kind of line them up against whoever would be in that slot corner, and it turns into a disaster. It was that way again. It's been that way for quite some time. It was that way tonight. It was that way on the first drive of the game. Nothing changes. Everything's the same concern. They were in a stretch where they gave up 10 straight possessions with a score. And if you want to make it worse, they were actually, if you think about it, in that Bills game where they gave up 500 yards of offense and 34 points, the last 2 drives, they also gave up points on that because they gave up the touchdown at the end of the fourth quarter, and then they gave up a field goal in overtime. It was just that the offense bailed them out, got themselves into field position to force it to overtime, and then scored a walk-off in overtime. So 12 of 14 possessions in a row, this defense gave up points. That's statistically hard to do and hard to be that bad. Let's see here. We still have the easy schedule, so we will go 14-3, Cowboys 11-6. They'll lose to the Bills, Dolphins, Lions 49. Finish 13-4. We'll lose to the Ravens. I love the optimism. I think we need some optimism after tonight, and I love that. But I feel like the Eagles played with that energy, which I hate. You're playing a rival. It doesn't matter how the back half of the schedule looks, and it doesn't matter how the last month looks. Like, play with some energy against your biggest rival. And I thought there was a lack of focus that showed up with the penalties, with the drops, with the fumbles, with everything. And just like, yeah, cool. I love the optimism. I really do. I hope that it turns out that way. And it very well could. Like, that's the funniest part, is they could still probably be the 1 seed in this division or in this conference. But the energy that you showed tonight in a big moment is so concerning, because you mix that energy with the points of weakness on this team, and you should be really concerned. So the defense, we'll get back to that. 10 straight possessions where they gave up a score. 12 of 14 possessions where they gave up a score. 3 missed tackles, touchdown on the first drive. They're at a point, I think this team could be in 3rd and 60, and I wouldn't feel comfortable that the defense could get off the field. They gave up a 2nd and 20, and it was on a pass interference on Darius Slay. and then they gave up a 2nd and 16 on the very next drive. So back to back, it just felt like even when they do make a play for themselves, they end up shooting themselves in the foot. I think the most hilarious version of that was when they finally got pressure. Hassan Reddick gets a sack on Dak Prescott. They're in a 3rd and 9. This was the 2nd and 16, actually. The 2nd and 16, Hassan Reddick gets a sack. They get pressure, exactly what they want to do. Kelee Ringo gets a double penalty. What a debut for him, by the way. He gets a double penalty. So even in a situation where you do what you're supposed to do, put them behind the sticks, make it a 2nd and 16, you bail them out. They get a pass interference and a face mask simultaneously, and it's a gain of 25, and they bail them out. So on that 60-yard field goal, they had them in 2nd and 20 twice on that drive. They still get points out of it. There was a 2nd and 16 that they gave up. In the second half, the Eagles opt not to go for the field goal. And then the very next drive, there's a 3rd and 9 and there's a 3rd and 6 for the Cowboys. They convert both of those. That turns into points as well. So it's, again, I wouldn't feel comfortable in this team getting off the field in 3rd and 60. I know in the early stages of that game, a lot of it was 3rd and 2. They weren't able to get themselves off the field, everything like that, because it's short distances. There were times where they actually did their job, got pressure, got home, or there was a holding call on the Cowboys. They're behind the 6, 2nd and 20. It didn't really matter. And I think that's how it felt the entire night. It felt like the Cowboys were playing every single down like they were in a 2nd and 2, and it felt like the Eagles played the entire night in a 3rd and 11. It just felt like that from the first drive of the game after that offensive pass interference. Do you like our odds? Oh, don't like our odds. I'll show this one too. Don't like our odds against Seattle. No, I don't. I agree. I think that's been a house of horrors for them for years. Now, another part of that is we'll see who's the quarterback for the Seahawks next week. Or late today, Geno Smith was scratched. Drew Lock started. I think I'd like my chances against Drew Lock. Again, this is still a really good Eagles team. The sky is falling right now, but they are still a really good team. I think the schedule is finally caught up to them. The gas tank is finally on E. And I think that they would look a lot better against Drew Lock than they would against Dak Prescott. But it does, like, I feel like that's beyond the point right now. It's the constant lack of focus, situational awareness situations that they put themselves in that doesn't make me confident that they could beat really good teams going forward. So another thing here, the Devontae Smith, AJ Brown thing. What the hell was that? That was the most disappointing Devontae Smith game. It was easily the worst game he's ever played as an Eagle. There's a few different moments of this. What was going on that drive where he drops the touchdown, and it looks like, I don't know if he misread it, mistimed it. I don't really know what happened there, but that turned out to be a disaster because that turned into the underneath route situation. So they were in 3rd and 11. They go underneath to AJ Brown. So it's 4th and 9. They choose to go for it. They're down by double digits. You could kick the field goal there, get it down to 11 if you wanted to. They opt to go for it. They throw it underneath again. So from 3rd and 11, after that Devontae Smith drop, they gained 4 yards on 2 completed passes. The Cowboys got the ball back after that. They kicked the field goal to make it 30-13. The drive after that, they go back to Devontae Smith. He fumbles. There were multiple drops by Devontae Smith tonight. It was in crucial moments, like the touchdown catch that he dropped, and then a fumble. The game is pretty much out of hand at that point, but you still have a chance to score. Again, it's a red zone turnover. So I don't know what happened with him tonight. It was the worst game I've ever seen him play as an Eagle, and I think it speaks to the lack of focus that this team had. There was a play in the first half with AJ Brown. He gets it. Honestly, Jalen Hurts put it on his ball sack and he still dropped it. So I don't know what was going on there. There was one where at the end of the half, I know it doesn't really matter and they probably couldn't have gotten themselves into field goal range, but he misses the toe drag. And I just thought there were so many moments, and it was kind of encapsulated by Devontae Smith's performance tonight, where I was like, this team's not focused. You can see it in the penalty yards. I mean, they had 3 turnovers that it is too. So AJ Brown had a fumble in the second half. And that was the other thing. Like, you come out of the half, you're moving the ball again. AJ Brown fumbles, and then you get like a stop, and you're like, all right, this is time. Like the defense got to stop, and then they got a turnover. They get a turnover for you. They get a defensive touchdown. All right, this is looking good. 3 and out again. So like I mentioned before, everything felt like a 2nd for the Cowboys. Everything for the Eagles for like a month straight has felt like they're in 3rd and 11. It feels like they are constantly behind the eight ball. There's no flow to this offense. It's very rigid. And I don't really get why with the amount of talent that you have on this team. I hate this for the Eagles, but crazy. I thought that they could win all the way up to Smith turning the ball over. I'm definitely very optimistic like that as well, where it doesn't really matter where we're at in the stages of the game. I will ride with the team nonstop. And they were driving to score. He fumbles and it was over. That was the final nail in the coffin. And I think it just was a summation of the night, just a total lack of focus, lack of intensity, lack of energy. I don't care how the rest of the schedule looks. Like, yeah, you play the Giants twice. Cool. Cardinals, I know this is kind of a tank for them. Awesome. Great. Yeah. I'd still like to see some energy and fight in a rivalry game, especially considering last week you came out and got destroyed by your other biggest rival and your other biggest competitor in this conference. The optics of how they've looked the past 2 weeks and how the defense has looked the past 3 weeks bothers me beyond belief because they are Swiss cheese and there's nobody who makes a play. There's nobody who makes a stop. They're light on third down. They brought the zero blitz and it almost worked. Kevin Byard actually did get home. He hits Dak's arm and then the ball goes right over Sidney Brown's hand into Jake Ferguson. So even when they bring pressure, it didn't work. Nothing worked. I just thought all in all, it was kind of a disaster. Speaking of disasters, Kelly Ringo tonight. I guess we'll just roast the entire team and go through the list of everybody who was horrible. I thought he was the worst, which is really saying something. What a debut for him. The first play that we saw him in, he got a double penalty. Very rare, very tough to do. Second play we saw him involved in, he got hurdled. So that's also fun. And then the third play that we saw him involved in was a deep shot to Michael Gallup over the top of Ringo. So it's hard to make that big of an impact on a game when you don't play that much, but Ringo was able to do it. On special teams, I love the fake punt call. I thought that was really good in the moment. It's also just paying attention. It was the one of the few moments of the game where I thought they had a good attention to detail and that they realized that it was an inexperienced gunner out there, and they have Olamide Zaccheaus as their gunner, who is a good pass catching wide receiver for the Eagles. It was a great play call. But then, Josh Jobe, what are you doing running into Kevontae Turpin when he's trying to fair catch and he's almost like leaning in? Like, how can you not tell that? You just can tell the lack of focus tonight again and again and again through the penalties, through the play calls, through the execution, through the drops, like you name it. There was just a total lack of focus. We'll touch on the running game quick. I thought they got away from it a little bit. And again, I know that was a big thing this week because the fans brought the sign and they only ran 8 or 9 times last week. And then the journalists kind of got on them. Were like, they are running the ball. They're just not really effective with it. And I get it because I see it from both sides. Running the ball sets everything else up and it makes it more effective. And they would run the ball more if they were more effective with it. But the biggest thing here is they are once again down by double digits before you can even blink. They give up a touchdown on the opening drive, they fumble, and they give up a field goal on the next drive. So if you're constantly playing from behind, it makes it really hard to get into this balance of run-pass option. And I think that's totally messed up this offense, where last year it felt like teams were constantly on their heels. And NFL Live did a great segment on this week. Last year, they were able to take a lot of deep shots. A.J. Brown felt like every week had a big one. Devontae Smith had a few. It was awesome. Life was easy. They did a great job this week of showing how the Eagles see the second least amount of single high safety behind the Dolphins. Surprise, because of Tyreek Hill. So teams are kind of making sure they don't hit the home run over the top to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and stuff like that. So in effect, you should be able to run the ball. They haven't been able to do that. But even more so, not only are they able to do that, now they're constantly playing from behind. So it makes it really tough to get into that rhythm of running the ball effectively, and running it and having a run pass balance. Last year, I felt like there was such a balance. It kept everybody on their heels. You would be in 2nd and 2 on an 8-yard run, and you'd be like, all right, we got to stop the run. They've had the ball for 5 minutes. And then they take a shot over the top to A.J. Brown. It's a score. It's whatever. You have 3 weapons that you can give the ball to in the passing game. You have the read option ability with Hurts, and that's another thing. Like, he just looks slower this year, so it doesn't feel like there's ever the threat that he's going to keep it on that read option. It doesn't even feel like they're running read options, to be honest with you. It feels like a lot of Hurts keeps are on passing plays that break down and things of that nature. So the guessing game has been eliminated with this offense. It's very predictable, and it's almost like, hey, hopefully Devontae or AJ make a play. And I know they brought Goddard back this week, so there's more weaponry at their disposal. But for the past month, since that injury to Goddard, it's been a very rigid offense that almost feels like we got to get the ball to those two and they've got to hit the home run. And that's really the only thing that we've got. They've turned into the baseball player who bats 180, strikes out a lot, and sometimes they'll hit for home runs. Like, that's all they're good for. They don't get on base, they don't draw walks, they don't have speed. They either hit a home run or they're striking out. And that's what the Eagles have become as an offense. Is very concerning to see. And we probably don't need it given the amount of talent that is on this team. I think this team is fatigued, but still so disappointing. They are who they are at this point. So, yeah, let's break that down into two separate segments. One, I think it's fair to say this team is fatigued. And it's disappointing to lose, but I do think they're fatigued. And I think we just saw it. Like, they beat this Cowboys team, right? Like, a month ago, they beat this team. So it's not like the Cowboys are 20 points better than them. Are the 49ers 25 points better than them? Probably not. But it's still disappointing to see because of the lack of execution during the game and some of the ways that they've lost this game, and some of the concerns that we've had have been highlighted in the position groups like linebacker, slot corner, stuff like that over the past weeks against good teams. So when you say they are who they are at this point, I feel like we've known who they are in a bunch of key positions. That's been exploited the past few weeks. So yeah, I agree. Like, they have still had some really good moments this year. The Bills, who are now 7-6, they're not technically a playoff team. I don't know anybody in the AFC who wants to see them as a wild card team this year. That was a really good win at home. The Chiefs, I know they're struggling on offense, but going to Arrowhead and winning is really tough to do, and they did it. The Cowboys are a good team, and they beat that team. This is still a really good Eagles team. So they are who they are. They have weaknesses, but who we've seen as the last few weeks, I hope, is just fatigue, because it's just felt like a team that does not have the fire right now to compete with the best of the best. Now, like you said, it could just be fatigue, and that's why they don't have that fire. And I really hope that that's the case, because aside from that, you can't keep getting blown out by these good teams. I want to talk about the Jalen Hurts situation. I think the running game, like we just talked about a second ago, has been much maligned. It's been talked about. They brought it up, the run the ball guys on the broadcast tonight. I don't know if it's just me, but Jalen Hurts just looks slower. And because he looks slower, I think the Cowboys, and part of this is Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator, but I felt like the Cowboys were more inclined to bring a ton of pressure tonight. Like, you saw the zero blitz multiple times tonight, and a few things play into that. One, they were up by a lot. So, like, listen, we give up the home run. They're still going to be down by double digits. Let's go after them. And then two, they are just an aggressive defense in general. But three, I feel like there's less of a threat with Jalen running the ball these days. He had the big run on the first drive of the game where they kind of just have this QB draw down, right? Like, Mulata talked about it after the Bills game. If we see a certain formation, we know Jalen's taking off. He did it on the first drive tonight. That was not the play that he fumbled. That was earlier on the drive. He did it again on that play that he fumbled. But aside from that, I really haven't seen him do anything with his legs that would warrant comparing him to last year's Jalen Hurts. And to me, he just looks slower. And I think it leads to stuff like you saw tonight, where he got a ton of pressure on him and zero blitzes from the Cowboys. And they're like, we'll take our one-on-one chances with Devontae Smith, Goddard, Brown, whoever it may be. Fine. We'll be fine. We're just going to take the pressure on Hurts. He won't escape. And I think that is what they did. And I'm interested to see. The Seahawks are another aggressive team. And I wonder if that happens again next week. And I think it will. I think it will. And I think you'll see that a lot more this season, because that threat of the Eagles running game, where it's like 8 yards a clip and then Jalen Hurts taking off. You remember that Packers game on Sunday Night Football last year where he had like 75 yards rushing in the first quarter? And it was just like they lost contained so much, and then he was just free to take off. But he just looks slower this year. And it just feels like that felt like 10 years ago. I don't really know what happened, but it just feels like he's a lot slower. I don't know if that was a Rams game where his knee kind of buckled and everything like that. I really don't know. The secondary as a whole, I'm super concerned about. I just don't think they're good. Like if I had one takeaway from tonight, I just don't think they're good. And we talked about this comment before. They are who they are. The secondary to me, like Jalen Hurts, I still have trust in. I think he looks slower, but I still have trust in him. The secondary, I don't have any trust in. Reed Blankenship is a good player. He's now been hurt 3 times this year. Maybe he's too undersized. We talked about that with the Kobe Dean before. It might just be too undersized. He's been hurt twice. Reed Blankenship's been hurt. Kevin Byard doesn't really make that big of an impact on the game. I thought the linebackers actually were better tonight. So from that position group, I thought was at least better, but there was nowhere to go but up statistically than what they gave up last week. But I just think the secondary looks like they get cooked too often. They're handsy and they oftentimes get away with it, but I thought there were times tonight where they were calling it, and it's kind of the tic tac stuff. And if they're allowed to get away, not allowed to get away with playing the hand fighting, then they end up in a lot of trouble. You saw it with James Bradbury a few times, and the slot corner has just been a disaster. It doesn't really seem like whoever they place in there has worked. Eli Ricks, Bradley Roby, I know is the guy, but I just don't know how much faith you have in the secondary. I think Sidney Brown shows flashes. I think he's a really good tackler. You saw him come up in coverage and tackle Rico Dowdle, which was a huge play because it set them up. It was 2nd and 22 that set them up for 3rd and 19. They were able to force a really long field goal. Now he made it, but in most cases, the other team won't have a kicker who can knock it down from 59. So I like him, but it just is not a position group that I have a lot of faith in. And that continues to be the thing. It's just like, have some fucking pride at this point. 10 straight possessions where you give up points, 12 of 14 possessions where you give up points. Like that was my main takeaway tonight is 2nd and 20, 2nd and 16, 3rd and 9. It didn't really matter what happened. On the drive where they actually got a 3rd down stop, the Cowboys went for it on 4th and 2 and converted. And with that position group, cornerbacks, it was a week of being told you don't tackle, you don't cover well, and they came out and just got torched again. Like, have some fucking pride and get yourself off the field once. It was just a disaster. So, all in all, I'm not going to say anything good about this team because I think everybody wants to look at the schedule and be like, yeah, like the schedule's easy down the stretch. So that's a good thing. And it is. But I just hated that the energy was what it was tonight, where it was a bunch of guys who were looking at the schedule and projecting that they could get wins down the road instead of focusing on the now and beating their rival. If you beat your rival tonight, you would have cemented that you have the division. Now you got to go play for this next month. And I hated the energy. I hated the lack of fire. How are you supposed to? Yeah, okay, you beat the Cardinals at home. I hope so, but that is what you're supposed to do. But I don't see anything from an execution standpoint on offense that you'd be like, yeah, I'm really happy with it, where this team is at. Again, they might just be fatigued, but I hated the lack of fire. Anytime you get a division rival, division opponent, you can dig them and bury them in the ground. Say, good luck in the wild card. We'll take the 1 seed. And instead you didn't. You just laid down. You laid down, and it's back-to-back weeks of just looking like you have no fire, no pride. It was just embarrassing. And yeah, I don't know. They are who they are, and I don't like some of the things that they do. The offense looks rigid. Nothing is changing about it. They are who they are, and it is going to continue to look rigid as it is. I've given up hope that we're going to go back and be like running on 1st down and turn it into 2nd and 2s. And then you have misdirection and you're going to have like play action. Then you'll be able to take the shots. The Giants divisional round game last year, it was run on 1st down, 2nd play of the game, play action pass, 30 yards down the field to Devontae Smith. That is so gone. And it just felt like that for the past month or so. It'll continue to be rigid. And I just hated the fire tonight. I don't know why. And aside from like maybe like Fletcher Cox or some special teams guys, I don't know who you could look at and be like, yeah, Hassan Reddick, I thought played really well too. But aside from that, I really don't know who you could be proud of. I thought they were out schemed. I thought they were out coached. I just didn't think they had any fire at all. I thought the word of the night was pathetic. I thought it was pathetic effort, pathetic execution, pathetic focus, pathetic drive. And it was just a pathetic 2 weeks from a team that we love a lot. But you have to call bullshit when it's bullshit. That was pathetic. And it's been pathetic for 2 weeks. 34, 42, 33, 109 points in 3 weeks. That's pathetic. That is pathetic. Call it what it is. I have a lot of hope that they could win the next 4 games, but call it what it is. That was pathetic effort from Sean Desai and his defense. So that's a wrap. What a week. I like to end with silver linings and optimism, but I feel like it's called Birds versus Boys. Like, this is the entire point of the podcast, is winning against the Cowboys. So to sit here and be like, well, they had a special teams play that worked, I feel like isn't doing it justice. Like, we need to be critical when it's time to be critical. You can still believe in this team that they're going to win the next 4 games and also be critical of them in this moment. And it's a bad loss, and it's back-to-back bad losses against good teams. So I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, let's all kumbaya and get ready for Seattle. No, they got their ass kicked for a second straight week, and they look pathetic. If this is called Birds versus Boys and they lost to the boys, then I think we need to call it out that was really bad. We'll be back this week with our show. Big, again, not over. This is a long way to go. Last month of the season should be really exciting. There were some exciting games on the schedule today. Next week, you get into the Saturday games. Sunday, I feel like the NFL will be hitting us nonstop. So we'll have our more reaction to this game, I'm sure. And then looking ahead to the weeks, the Cowboys are kind of starting their gauntlet as the Eagles start to wrap up on it, going into Seattle and then beyond. So we'll have a lot to talk about this week. But this is kind of just like Netflix territory. I wouldn't get on social media. I wouldn't get on Twitter. I would watch a lot of Netflix this week until Monday Night Football in Seattle. If you're an Eagles fan, thank you to all who tuned into the TikTok Live and to everybody who followed us on YouTube and Twitter tonight. We'll be back this week for more content. Not our best day, though. We'll be back.